I'm Jeremiah Arcaraz Mitchell. I'm a software project manager with the Barry-Wehmiller Design Group. So as I touched on earlier, Barry-Wehmiller is a very large company. The design group handles everything from architecture and engineering type work all the way through this enterprise technology consulting and other kind of services down the road. But specifically within the control system group here, we do a lot of work with Ignition. We're an independent system integrator. We work with all sorts of platforms, but we're also a big partner of the team over at Inductive. So we're an enterprise integrator, which is the top level of partnership there, as well as a premier Ignition integrator. We work with Cepasoft and a couple of these other kind of like add-on services that are tightly partnered with Inductive and Ignition as well. So, Design Group has 45 offices across the US and Canada, and we have 1,600 experts here between this architecture and engineering process group all the way through our control system professionals. So we have Ignition certification in 25 of those offices, so chances are we have someone close to you who can do Ignition work, if that's what you're looking for. I'm gonna go on. So I had to chuckle a little bit when Don and Dante sent me the title to this presentation. So when I think of OT and IT, seamless is not exactly the word that comes to my mind. The truth is that even though the hardware has converged a little bit between the OT and IT spaces, the nomenclature and a lot of the applications and deployment practices are quite different. So you look 5-10 years ago even at a pretty well designed manufacturing site, and everything's locally hosted. You have virtual machines. You're using OPC UA Modbus protocols to talk with all of your PLCs. You have local historians. You're doing some kind of like on-site analysis work. You're doing that kind of thing. So that's the well-run plant of yesteryear potentially. But on the information technology side, as we start to butt up against this space, we get asked a whole range of other questions. It's can you host these applications in the cloud instead? Can you maybe forgo the virtual machines in place of something like a containerized application? So we can save on our resourcing there. How do you handle SQL queries to our outside databases? Can we use REST API calls to interact with some of our business side applications? And then there's a whole range of other acronyms that start to flow through ERPs. How do you work with SAP, data lakes in general? All of these kind of different questions as we are exposed to the broader IT space. So I'll touch on kind of the challenges of that and how Design Group solves those. But I want to emphasize that there is a really large disparity in like the needs and the familiarity of both of these groups. And so what Ignition is great at doing, and what the Inductive team has been great at focusing their efforts on, is a product that lets us kind of answer confident yes to these questions that come out of the IT group, while also still meeting the OT needs as well. So one big aspect of that is deployment flexibility. Our customers that come to us and they ask about, instead of putting this thing on a Windows server, is there a Linux option available? Is there a way that I can host this thing in the cloud instead? What about from a database perspective? Do I have to pay for Microsoft SQL Server, or can you potentially use Postgres or one of these other options here? And so there's a lot of value to that in smaller deployments, but when you're really focused on the cost savings, but also in larger scale deployments when you want those just kind of battle hardened applications that the IT group is already familiar with and eager to support. So I'd say there's benefits on both ends of the spectrum there, and the licensing model at Inductive supports that as well. So it really helps us to have cost-effective solutions that meet our customers' needs. Another part that we do pretty heavily here at the Design Group is using Ignition as a platform to develop custom applications on top of. So Ignition is great about communicating with the PLCs and allowing all serving up web graphics, to managing identity providers, all of these various aspects, all of these different tools that we need. But also our customers come to us with particular custom requirements, something that it doesn't make sense for there to be a well-defined way within Ignition to do it, and so they turn to our developers to actually provide that for them. So we're able to actually develop within the Ignition platform. There's a lot of built-in dependencies and other kind of help there that allows us to kind of streamline that process. And then, we already know we have these tools. It's not how do we figure out the entire process of serving up a web graphic to you. It's how do we develop this within perspective so that we, using the tools that are already there. Or how do we take the tag data that came off of a PLC through Ignition's tools there and use that in a slightly different way. So we really appreciate the ability there of Ignition to provide all of these kind of different services that allow us to focus our efforts on just the small bit of custom work that the customer needs and simplifies the rest of it. Yeah, version control. So you start working in the custom application development space, and one of the first questions that a lot of our industrial customers start to ask us is, how are you tracking that? I think, how do you manage your changes? Gone are the days of just taking snapshots on your virtual machine, of maybe saving a daily backup or something like that. Our customers are now more than ever looking for us to integrate with the same kind of applications they use on the IT or the enterprise side to manage the development of our projects at the OT level. So with Ignition, we're able to work with these different change management tools, GitHub, Azure DevOps, as well as GitLab. We do very much the same kind of activities you might see in the software space, where we're doing sprint style deployments, we're using Kanban boards, things like that. It really depends on the needs of the customers, right? The Ignition allows you that flexibility to have a conventional SCADA deployment, but also to have this custom application that's managed in kind of an IT first format as needed as well. And then one of the really big things one of the ways that Ignition differentiates itself is this question of containers. So more and more frequently, I'd say our customers come to us and they ask, resourcing isn't free anymore. We used to think that a virtual machine in the cloud was great and cheap, but now we need to be really efficient with our resources. So can you, instead of spinning up an entire virtual machine to do this, could it potentially be answered by a container? And something that Ignition's great about is there is a container-based deployment of Ignition. So this is something the documentation on it is still kind of a work in progress, but there's a lot there already for those that use it and are kind of familiar with this space to work with. And the Inductive team is constantly adding new features here that allow us to instead of deploying 5 VMs in the cloud, be able to make those containers instead. Maybe make that a Kubernetes cluster if that's what our customer is familiar with or wants to use. And we can do that locally if they have the group to support that or in the cloud. I'd say really that the cost savings advantage there is a big driver beyond even the licensing advantages and other deployment advantages we've seen to Ignition. Resourcing plays a huge role in these larger deployments. When I was doing these slides, Don asked me to spend a moment just talking through virtualization versus containerization. So for those of you who may not be familiar, traditionally we do a lot of our work in virtual machines now, and that's the operating system is contained within the virtual machine itself. So you think Windows might require 100 gigabytes of install for just the base application itself, the base operating system, plus you put your applications on top of it. You end up starting to have a fair number of resources within this virtual machine here. A container essentially abstracts the operating system from the application itself. And this is not a new technology. This is not something that's kind of coming out in recent years. This is robust, battle tested, used by many of the biggest names in the business. And so there's a lot of security in place to make sure that even using parts of a shared operating system, they still maintain that separation. But the resource loading for these containers is significantly less. You can run 10, 20 of these things on your laptop at a time, as opposed to trying to do that with virtual machines would quickly bog down your system. There are certainly a lot of benefits to containerization and kind of these other aspects that I touched on before. But all of that comes with challenges, right? So especially on the containerization side, but also across each of those aspects that I touched on. So the biggest thing I've seen, my background is control systems. I started with PLCs and SCADA type systems. My professional engineering license is in control systems. They never teach us about containers. They never teach us about code management tools, any of this kind of thing. It's a whole separate language and a whole separate set of applications and methodologies that are in this space. So a lot of times your controls engineer at the plant level isn't familiar with these kind of tools. And a lot of times the IT groups are a little less than understanding of the needs of the OT side as well. So you end up with this disconnect of someone that's used to being able to plug in every machine and pull all the data they need off of it, and these IT security professionals that are constantly watching for every risk and every potential source of intrusion. So there's a whole variety of challenges there, as I hit on, but unfamiliarity with each other's worlds drives a lot of that as well. It's difficult to containerize applications, so not everything has containerized version. That's something that we see. I mentioned one of these advantages of Ignition is they have a very well supported and far along containerized version. So you don't have to try to put together beta versions of different products or run a combination of virtual machines and containers to make something work. But it isn't easy to make that happen, and so it's taken a lot of strategic direction from the inductive automation team to provide a product that meets those needs, and so we're really appreciative of that. But coming along with that as well is just the infrastructure support and technical constraints. A lot of times, as I mentioned, the OT resources aren't familiar with how to work with these tools. They're definitely not familiar with how to manage them as well. So you have this challenge of how do you get a centralized IT organization to manage a local Kubernetes cluster, or how do you coordinate between these different groups to provide the flexibility for an OT resource to get in and access all of these different containers when they're not accessed through just a remote desktop connection. Integration with these legacy systems becomes a challenge as well. How do you run virtual machines on one side as well as containers co-located with them and have them talk back and forth? The structures there are a little bit different, so it's certainly possible. We certainly do that all the time, but it adds to that challenge of how you roll out containerized applications. And then ultimately, one of the things that I've found is the funniest challenge, maybe possibly one of those disorienting things, is just that a lot of these applications that we use are not really sort of prepared for like a Unix platform. So a lot of things I take for granted using a Windows operating system interface aren't necessarily there in a very streamlined container. One big thing is a graphical user interface. So a lot of our containers are spun up from code. You go and try to do that. You think you go through the QE or something for an Ignition install. That doesn't exist in this case. You have to do all of that from code beforehand and get it right from the start. So yeah, there's all sorts of challenges that come with that are difficult for the OT resources to wrap their heads around, and difficult for IT resources to adopt to the needs of the site. But Ignition helps to sit in the middle there and really. In closing, this is like I said, a highly versatile industrial program. Ignition really does sit at the middle of that IT and OT space. We are increasingly getting asked by our customers to meet their IT needs as well as their OT needs, and Ignition allows us to keep doing that. So I want to again say thanks to you guys for that. The cost effectiveness, it's always a part of it, from the containerization and resourcing aspect to the licensing model itself. So this is always at the front of our customers' minds, and it helps to make Ignition an easier sell in that regard as well. That ability to quickly add on new gateways and new functionality is a big part of continued growth and frequent projects as a system integrator. So we know that if we get Ignition into a site, there are opportunities there to grow and add on new resources, both from the way they love working with the system, but also just from the capabilities of the system as well. It's actively developed. As I mentioned, the containerized deployment is a big thing for us specifically. So they are actively developing that, and the improvements that are coming down the road are only going to make it easier for us as we continue on. And I really do believe, I think there's several of my design group colleagues on the call, I believe, but we certainly believe that Ignition is driving the industry 4.0 and continuing this process of like digital transformation within our customers.